We're just not there yet. But we are looking at statewide program, and I just can't say that I know enough about Central Coast, about, Mr. Harris is saying he's certain that everyone knows the answer to this. I know that if you look at statewide, people don't know the answer to that. I mean, they should. I think we need to move in that direction. And there might be surrogates. How long was your pump running? But, so that people can estimate. But there were a number of what I would say experts in this area that felt that it's just, we're not matured enough yet at this point. So
But are we
maybe
not mature enough because we're not asking for it?
No, it's so, I actually spent a co-op in college trying to measure this very value, and worked for the Irrigation Training Research Center in college trying to measure this very value, and it gets complicated so fast that you really start to break down, and you actually end up with a better result by just knowing how much evapotranspiration the crop actually had based on weather data, and then the irrigation system you used so that you know roughly the efficiency of that irrigation system. Because there's so many variables. If you're tracking your pump use, and what if the irrigator forgot to switch over from one bank of drip tape to the other bank within the same field, and one ran an hour and one ran an hour and a half? You've already thrown off your balance. Is that a field balance? Is that a row balance?
But in your example, then what use is the concentration data? I mean, I have to go back and forth.
Right. So the concentration data, to me, is the basis for knowing it. That in combination within the crop, because if I know the crop, I can within bounds estimate what the amount of water that was put on to grow that crop. And that's typically what we use when we're doing irrigation design and irrigation management. When I tracked growing degree day models and stuff like that, we didn't actually measure. One of the ranches I was in was Westlands, and we had actually meters at the corners of the fields, and we reported that number to Westlands, just simply report that. I relied more on the models we ran and the soil tests we pulled to monitor the moisture versus the weather than I did the irrigation, because of the variabilities associated with it.
I understand that at the fine point. I do. And there are certain places where we've taken things out because they involve a guess. And we didn't want too many guesses, and we're sending stuff to the expert panel. And there's just a difference in opinion of what, and we talked about this months ago, but there's just a difference of opinion on which guesses are valuable and which might not be valuable. And it is hard to say we're going to do concentration and we're not even going to ask the method of how much, or a guess of how much water is involved in terms of loading. I get that you can't get it precisely, but this is something where I think we do need to ask for more.
well,
So
And maybe because I wasn't sitting at the task force meetings, but it's just hard for me to imagine that there's not a difference, and that you might, as a grower, when you were a grower, understand how you were doing it, and you might estimate it based on knowing what kind of irrigation method you did. But that is asking the regional board to guess a lot more. I'm sort of convinced at that we need something other than just the concentration, even if it's asking, like in our why did you apply that much nitrogen, just to start kind of knowing.
well, I think where the task force, the folks felt a lot more comfortable with irrigation method.
right.
And so, maybe a drop down on that as well, as far as method.
Well, there's certainly that. That's where the task force seems to be going. If you wanted to add a concentration in, I guess we could word it, or excuse me, a mass loading in, then you could word it in such a way that it's an estimate that's not necessarily based on a measurement of actual water applied, but in essence, they're then doing the calculation based on cropping. Because that's, in my experience, that's actually what they do. I mean, you're not going to go, your measurement after the fact is going to be tough.
Darren, can I just make a suggestion that we use add the mass loading if they know the amount of water and an estimate if they don't?
Yes.
And that way, we're not having people estimate when they could give us the value, but we are when they aren't, when they can't.
Does that work?
There's a couple ways to do that,
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be adding a little phrase to section C under the two different methods. Yeah, I think Jonathan's on to something.
This
It's
is
page 47.
of the red line. They're the two different methods, and so Board Member Moore is referring to paragraph C in both of those methods, and it's page 47 of the September 20th red line. Actually, I think it's paragraph B in the first method.
If I can,
Oh, you're
Chair
right.
Marcus,
It's B and
we're going to have, I think, a hopefully relatively small number of proposed changes. Just in the interest of getting it right, I think we're going to ask for a couple minutes to
yes,
work together to get the words and get them up on the screen for everybody to see them.
Okay.
yes,
I was
But
wondering
there
if
may be more, though.
yeah.
Hold them.
I was wondering if we could also ask the Central Coast Board about the issue about the point of use technologies. We
Yeah, that's right. That would be a good one.
we could, if the board is interested, add something to the language on page 33 about identifying the areas where the point of use technologies would not be, could not be used because of the high nitrate levels. But I think it might be useful to understand from the regional board's perspective what their expectation might be.
So I'm not clear on the question. We're talking about the contouring, right, in concentrations?
Right, and what you would approve as people upgrade them, their
So,
plans.
One thing about these cooperatives is my approval is not an all-out approval. It's an approval of a work plan. And each of the deliverables and their timelines and deliverables,
Right,
those each have to be submitted for approval. We
right.
just don't accept them. And that's typical of any kind of cleanup program, too, where if you have dry cleaners or whatever, people will say, well, we've put these wells here and here,
Right.
and this is what the contours we've come up with, and we would say, oh, that's great, or we would say, no, we think you need to reach out further and look in this area. Same thing applies. All of the data that they collect, we get all the raw data. It's all going to come to us. The contouring was for public display purposes. So I would say that I reserve all rights to have them make adjustments to the contours. And if we've got wells that are showing 300, I would say contour them, show them. Let's see the whole picture. If we're going to, the contours were a compromise with the co-op to allow us to provide information to the public that they were sensitive about. So if we're going to do that, there should be full disclosure, and that we should contour all the data, not to some arbitrary limit.
Good.
Does that answer?
And so that means for the implications of the order language, we don't need a change in the order language because it's up to the discretion of the EO.
It's up to my discretion. No, I don't need a change.
Right.
Or we could set it as a minimum, I think, either way. So.
Yeah,
I don't think you need to set a minimum. I would prefer,
Yeah.
to have the authority to approve
Yeah.
the contour maps.
Yeah, and there's a discretionary review mechanism in here and everything. So, in other words, no change to the proposed language.
I'll look at my attorney because I was reading that. Is that right? Correct.
Okay.
And then you also have the ability, let's talk about the seasonal variation or the two-time testing. You also, do you have the discretion? Does he have the discretion? Do you have the discretion?
I'm going to ask
To have it-
attorney.
Yeah.
To make it clearer, I think we're going to add a phrase to that says this is what has to be done at a minimum, so that it's clear that the EO can add additional requirements.
Clarity is very important. Anything that's left ambiguous is it's just going to be difficult, because then we're going to have to sit down and talk about it and negotiate it. I mean, if we can get to clarity and be clear,
Okay.
the fewer things we leave ambiguous, the better off it's going to be for everyone involved.
Okay.
Yeah, I
so
mean, what
change
I'm
the
trying to do is just make sure that we're not making it so clear that we're saying that you have to test more than really is going to be valuable, but you have the discretion to add the testing if it's valuable.
Yes,
That just seems like the most efficient way to
yes. I
do
agree.
it.
Okay, so there will be a proposed change.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And I actually want to run one other idea by Ken, if that's okay. So I heard from Mr. Shemek that one of the concerns with the proposals is that, so we're setting a deadline of November 1 for proposals to come in, any new proposals. And we say then that we need the drinking water characterization within a year of any approval. And there could be any amount of time between the proposal coming in and the approval. What if we set a hard deadline instead, something like December, then I'm getting this number, this date because Ms. Dunham proposed it, but something like December 1st, 2014 for that to be completed instead of just saying 12 months from approval.
I might be confused, but I think it would be, if what we're really wanting here is that they continue to do the individual monitoring, and then that we want to allow people to propose a cooperative monitoring, I would just say that. And then they have to continue the individual monitoring until the EO approves a new plan. And so it doesn't propose a specific deadline for them. It doesn't create an artificial set of new requirements. It allows, we are putting a workload on Ken, but it allows them to propose something, but they have to continue monitoring on the individual until they get approval.
So
But I think
they would
that-
then get the individual drinking water wells all done.
That's right.
Well, but I thought, I think that the issue might be economy of scale and getting more people in the existing program. And then, because I asked this question earlier, and I think that it was clarified that that probably is not where folks would want to head anyway. In other words, to set up their own as opposed to joining into an existing program. And to have two separate dates within the existing program would be problematic for the regional board. Yeah.
That's
So-
correct. I'm going to ask Angela to talk about the scheduling of individual monitoring, because I think it's very important
Yeah,
and pertinent to
good.
the discussion.
So currently, growers had until March of this year to submit the plans and get approval, and we did approve them in July. The individual groundwater monitoring dates were due for those growers who didn't have a cooperative or who didn't elect to be in a cooperative. They were to complete or to start their first period of sampling between March and June of 2012. And then they are now in the second period of their sampling, which is September through December of 2012. So they should be doing it now. So to reopen that,
You mean 2013?
No, 12.
right
They're going to
now.
be done with their
Right.
sampling.
So the suggestion is not to undo that, but to allow people to join a cooperative in addition to doing that.
and the current order, I believe, allows them to do that. The current agricultural order, without any changes, allows them to do that while still complying with their individual requirements. What we don't want to do, I think, is to create confusion about what are my options now? Can I delay my individual groundwater monitoring? That becomes difficult to implement.
Well, I think we would be encouraging you to do that with this order. I guess that's sort of the undercurrent of us looking at alternative language, requiring individual sampling. So you could do it right now. You
Well,
could go ahead and let them in, and I guess I agree with Steve. I'm willing to stay till 10 o'clock at night if it means some sort of a discussion as a way to, I'm looking at, I would like to see expansion of the program, and because it gets us that much closer to actual changes on the ground and getting folks to deal with third parties that they trust, and also mainly economies of scale, bringing the numbers up as far as the participants in the program. So if we can work something out here now, I think that would be terrific.
So the monitoring, so for example, all the individual monitoring for those who are not currently in a program, they have to complete it by December of this
Right.
year.
Of this year.
I would say that has to stay.
Right.
They have to complete that monitoring. So
That's
they're not
what
gonna-
we've
they're
been
not gonna
talking
gain
about.
anything from that part.
Yep.
Secondly, I would point out that whatever coalitions we have now are cooperatives does not mean that the same entities or the same structure will even exist for the next order. It doesn't mean they're going to carry over. In fact, there's one monitoring program that probably will not exist the next time. So, it's kind of a,
Well,
I
but
don't
there
know
are
if we're
some
gonna
that are, I mean, I don't know what.
I don't know if we're going to get, if you're gaining much in that sense or not, because we're looking at, and I know the ag community, and we're not discouraging or encouraging, I think at this point, and they can speak for themselves, but I think they want to get away from waivers. And by going to, WDRs, there's much better long-term stability in which you could build coalitions that have the ability to be sustained and to last over many, many years. Whereas with the waivers, the waiver changes every time, comes up for renewal and changes every time. So what we have today is, and I would guess it's going to look different than what we end up with in 2017.
So what you're saying is, if I'm listening correctly to what you, or understanding correctly what you're saying is, and what you're saying, Angela, is if we have we're keeping the existing requirements because they're under that system for individual monitoring. There's not an advantage to creating a whole new system for the life of this waiver for a coalition, but people could do the things. There's nothing to stop them from doing that collective monitoring and characterization that's in their interest without you having to do a
Correct.
formal approval, especially if they're continuing to do the individual monitoring.
And we are encouraging them to start talking among themselves to decide how they are going to self-organize. And I will point out, hypothetically, of course, when we were doing these approvals back in the spring, this very suggestion was made to a group who flatly turned it down. We said, join the North. They said, no, we've considered that, and our board does not like that option. We're not going there. We're going to stay individual. We said, okay, that's your choice, but we think it is a viable option you may want to consider.
Right, but so they could have a spin-off on their own, or they could join the club that's already in existence that,
No, I'm saying in the past, this
I understand,
happened.
I understand. But that's why I'm saying, I think anything to encourage, I mean, if there's a group that has got it right, or is in the process of getting it right, why not just let everybody come under the tent? And I think that's what we're trying to say here, is what can be done so that you are still protected and that water quality is protected. If we have individual sampling, or individual testing going on, and then in addition, get them in the group that's moving forward. This is, toward innovation and the next round. Get them in now.
So I guess my counter would be that the group we have now is our first. We've worked very hard with them to try to make sure they're going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
There's no guarantee they will be successful. I hope they are. I think they have their hands full right now. And, adding a whole other group on, I mean, you have to think about logistics. You've got to have staff, you've got to have trucks, there's driving distance. I mean, it's a mini army you're mobilizing to do some of this kind of work. And I know the unemployment rate in California is high, and maybe there are plenty of engineers and people out there who are looking for work, but it's, there's more to, it's like a construction project. Now you've just increased the size of that construction project, and you've got to mobilize to do that.
I understand, but I mean, I think maybe it's Mr. Loffer will be willing to help me out here about what I can say and what I can't. I think there's an interest by those that are involved to go ahead and allow this to happen. So I don't...
Well, I am a fan of coalitions, but I'm trying to understand the very specific logistical challenges of doing it right now. And I think people have said a lot about how it could it could create different expectations. But then when I hear an offer to say, fine, we'll continue to do the individual monitoring that everybody's worried about losing, I think, well, that's good. Then you might get the best of both. And I'm just still having trouble understanding why that's a problem. That's why I'm trying to understand what you're saying for you. A bit of workload, but you can say the parameters.
If they want to continue, if they're going to do, and they're going to serve up all of that extra, they're going to do individual monitoring. Here's the other side, is the growers at that point have basically satisfied their requirements. So now joining a cooperative, they're going to have to pay to join the cooperative. So there's an additional cost to them.
But they might want to.
They might want to.
I mean, just because they're going to get a more robust characterization of the groundwater, which is something we all kind of want. I'm just trying to understand.
And like I said, I don't think the area needs characterization. It's already adjudicated, and it's already a managed basin that they actively manage.
And that's true of the entire south?
No, it's just a Santa Maria Basin.
All right. Is that all? That's not
That's
coalition?
the major growing area. A lot of the other stuff around San Luis is vineyards, and, it's smaller, it's more hilly, and it's more vineyards. I don't know what's down near Santa Barbara, citrus.
Well, I think it's important also to remember that we have hundreds of growers who have already complied, and so much of the region is really already.
Yeah, so what would be the problem if they've already complied and you've gotten the data you want, or you're going to get the data you want? Why not let people also join? Again, that's the premise. I'm just not understanding
I
why
think
this
at
is hard.
point,
I'm just trying to
if-
understand it.
If we can come to agreement that they must submit, all growers who are not in a currently approved cooperative
Mm-hmm.
must complete all individual monitoring according to the current schedule.
Right, that's what's being
Well,
proposed.
let's have a party.
Okay. Well, good. That was good. We had, this may seem to some people like we just had the same conversation 5 times, but I do think in this issue, there's a lot of people hearing what they, I'm not going to give my ecosystem management speech, but they're hearing what they think someone's going to
Yes.
say versus what they say. And that just is a natural thing. No criticism, but I think we're all doing it. So that's helpful.
And
Because I think that is what
so
we're
really
asking
for
about
us,
right
there
now.
aren't- Okay, so now we have to get the timeline. So they complete the monitoring, but it's also the characterization. So what's the board's idea in terms of the current, I would not want to modify the current cooperative schedule.
No.
The one that's in place currently has a time schedule. They're off and running. That should not be modified.
Mm-hmm.
We spent 6 months negotiating that. That should be off. The new one, I think if we have the monitoring data, at that point,
But based on what you said, that Santa Maria and some of the areas that might want to join in with a group, if they've already, they kind of have a head start. I mean, they have already got things characterized, so maybe it won't take them as long to catch up.
well, we could impose the same schedule on them, but I'm not sure that the other folks in the room would agree with that. But
Well, the date that was proposed was December 2014.
yeah, that's fine. We can go with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I can, so I'm all in favor of parties, but just a little bit of clarity. I think we can actually work with this kind of an approach where, if I understand correctly, we're really talking about not a new deadline for new groups to submit proposals, but rather allowing dischargers to continue to join already approved groups.
Well, that gets tricky because the currently approved program is county-specific. So
Right.
any additional ones, I mean, we have to have geographic boundaries. So, I guess I don't know how we would do that. I haven't given much thought to by county
There'd have
or.
to be some additional information coming in. The question, I think, in our thinking was, if you have people still have to do their monitoring, and then if they can come up with something, and it may be trying to grow, but you're going to join somebody or do their own that very much mirrors. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that you know more than we do, obviously, that you've spent a lot of time working on what your expectations are for characterization and monitoring, and someone would be well served if they did a proposal to you that mirrored something that you had already approved, as opposed to coming up with some wild new idea. And we could say something about how the actual compliance schedule had to be short, or whatever that date is. I mean, it just seems like there's a way to do it that makes
So
it
if-
easier
if-
for you.
So if there was an existing hypothetical cooperative and they wanted to grow, they would, I don't know how we would do it, an addendum or whatever. Their current plan would stay the same. They would say, we want to add counties X, Y, and Z. We're going to complete the individual monitoring. The people are obligated. And the same kind of products we originally proposed will be these products. And here's our proposed timeline to complete it by December 2014.
Right, or a different group could
Or a
say they
different group.
want to do something, and it would behoove them to submit something that is
Yes.
very close to what they know you've already approved.
I would say the currently approved one would be the minimum to
Yeah.
submit
Right.
for approval.
Just because we have to draft something here. Just a fine point on continuing their individual monitoring obligations. Some people actually have to do annual monitoring. Others only have to do one round of monitoring. And so my assumption here is that we're talking about they have to complete their initial annual round of monitoring, but are you thinking that they would actually, if they're tier 3, they would actually continue to do and yearly monitoring thereafter?
I would suggest that they have to complete the requirements that they're currently obligated to do, which is the individual groundwater monitoring through December of 2012.
So just that? Okay.
If they join the cooperative, right?
So do we need this date of November 1st? That's, I'm still a little confused about
I feel
that.
like we do so
Yes.
that he's not dragged out. If we're
Yes.
going to even do that, it
Okay.
needs to be
Yes.
narrowly
It's gotta be
constrained.
cut off.
Do the monitoring, you got to cut it off so that it's, and as simple as possible for them.
So I would make one suggestion, though, if you're open to it. I understood you saying that they had to be finished by December of 2013
2014.
with the monitoring?
No, there's two things. There's the individual monitoring, which they must complete. They're in their second round now, which is due December of this year.
Right, and so,
The additional work that would come under a new cooperative would be all due December 2014.
right, and so I guess that it would make sense to me, and I don't know if it makes sense to you, to base their timeframe on proposing a new cooperative in January of 2014, so they can finish this monitoring, be done with that, submit it before they start anew.
Well, the growers are doing their own monitoring. The monitoring's going on. It's going to be the grower shipper associations and others who, the representatives who are going to be working with individuals to form it, so I don't think there's a conflict there
Right, well, and
in
if
terms of
people
workload.
really want to do it, they should do it.
Yeah.
But they should do it in something you'll approve
Yes.
easily.
And if I can, just to be clear, the current proposed December 1, 2014 deadline is just for the drinking water component of the cooperative groundwater. It's not for aquifer characterization. We weren't that specific.
It would be for everything
Oh.
it would be an identical schedule to what is currently approved in terms of products.
My
It's
point
a
is,
chance to catch up essentially with the other groups.
Because currently, well, no, wait,
so
let me
the-
put it
the
this
s-
way.
The state board's order doesn't talk about a deadline for aquifer characterization. You might have your own deadlines, that's fine, this
Okay.
wouldn't disturb those.
Okay. We can negotiate. We'll leave that to our discretion, my discretion. Yeah.
All right, that's helpful. And then the discussion about the submittal of the nitrogen risk factor, I hope you're okay with it's 2 months from when you put out whatever the reporting method is. Because you don't want to put them in the thing where we say, okay, it's December 1st, and then you all don't tell them how to report until November 1st.
I think your state board staff will have a specific suggestion
Okay, good.
for that.
It might be helpful, just, Angela was able to come up with a projection for when they'd be able to have the form updated, and could you just tell us what that is? And
So we believe, after consulting with State Board, that we could have a revised annual compliance form within 30 days. And then growers have requested about a period of 60 days to be able to inform growers and provide instruction. And so we're working around those dates, which would require the annual compliance form to be submitted in early 2014.
Well, I'll leave it to you all to figure out what's most doable. Okay, now, other questions? Then my suggestion is you have a little time to write and put something up on the screen, and we will all talk amongst ourselves and wait for that. Okay, thank you. We're not gonna make it 7:10. No. No, because we're not gonna be done. I don't wanna.
I would suggest, turn the-
Sorry, hey. Fine, thank.
We have a
Commissioner Bishop is here.